Hi, welcome to ThinkTech Asia, coming to you from downtown Honolulu. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, Associate Professor of Geography at University. Our topic today is about China-Hawaii legal communities, possibilities for mutual benefit. And my guest today is Roger Epstein. And you have, if you have been tuning in to our ThinkTech shows, you will know that Roger was a guest at ThinkTech Asia 2 weeks ago. And at that show, he was talking about many different kind of spiritual matters, connectedness, Hawaii forgiveness projects, and all the different spiritual practices that Roger follows. And that was only his weekend and evening work. And here we're talking about his day job. And during the day, he is a lawyer at Cades Schutte and has been practicing law for 42 years, and tax law, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so so today's program, you're going to talk to us about legal work in China, experiences you have in China, and talk about U.S., Hawaii, and China legal communities and the connections there and how that's going to benefit Hawaii. And that's a very important topic because we know a lot of Chinese are coming here.
And a lot more to come.
That's right.
A lot more to come.
Let's have you start to talk about your involvement in China just as a start so that people know what you're doing.
Okay, well, let me give you a little background in my profession. So I graduated from college with a degree in accounting. And then I went to work for the Internal Revenue Service in Washington, D.C. And after a year, I started going to law school at night at Georgetown University. And so by the time I got out of law school, I'd been with the Internal Revenue Service for 5 years. And then that was 1972. And I just fell into this job in Hawaii with the Cades Schutte Law Firm. And moved out here in August of 1972. Shortly thereafter, I got involved with two very large clients in Hong Kong. Jardine Matheson, which was one of the largest British companies in Hong Kong, and they involved in many industries there. They had just acquired the old Theo Davies company, one of the big 5 Hawaii companies, at the end of 1973. And then Run Shaw of the Shaw Organization, which at that time was the largest, most productive filmmakers in the world. They were making 29, 30 movies every year. They created the Kung Fu genre. Oh, wow. And so I would go to Hong Kong and meet with them. It was very fascinating for me as a young boy. I was 28, and one of our other clients was flying charters to Hong Kong. So they had a 2-bedroom suite in the penthouse of the Hyatt Hotel.
Wow, amazing experience.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They had a dining room table for 8 and a waiter in their room when you came up in the morning for breakfast.
Wow.
And so they offered to have me meet Run Shaw, who was 70 at the time and a Knight of the British Order. They said, where are you going to meet him? I said, we don't know. So he said, why don't you invite him here? So here I was, their 28-year-old U.S. tax lawyer, meeting them in a 2-bedroom suite in the penthouse of the Hyatt Hotel in Hong Kong.
Wow. We should, I wish I knew that I could have you maybe take some photos.
Yes. Well,
to the show.
It was a long time ago. And then I had some other Chinese experiences that came from I hurt my back, and I went from doctor to chiropractor to acupuncturist. And the acupuncturist, Lily Su, had a school called the Lily Su School of the 6 Chinese Arts. And it was a Taoist church that also had an acupuncture clinic and a school. So I told her if she reorganized that as a church on top, she could get really good tax treatment. So we did that, and then she said, well, now you have to be chairman of the board.
And that's in Hawaii, right?
That's in Hawaii. So I was chairman of the board for an acupuncture clinic, a Taoist organization, business, for 20 years. And learned a lot about Chinese culture, and but it just happened, it was just happenstance that these things came up for me as I came here. And so then I would go to Hong Kong every 6 months and meet my clients and do some work for them, and then travel around Asia a little bit. When I first went to Hong Kong, I remember I had the tourist clients, so they gave me a car and a guide, and she took me all over Hong Kong. And one of the things I remember, this was 1975 maybe, we went up the new territories and we looked down. You could see train tracks and fence. And she said,
that's China.
That's China. That's exactly
right.
what she said. That's China. Nobody could go there.
And the borders were closed at that time.
Yeah. And then in 1982, the other travel group that was connected, so this was a San Francisco travel group sending tourists there. That was my client. But they had a local tourist company that took care of their passengers when they got there. And so, and I did work for that company too later on. So they sent me to China. I told them I wanted to go to China in 1982, about 8 years after I was going to Hong Kong. So they sent me to China. In those days, you could only go with a tour group. So they had just sent a tour group, and they sent me to meet the tour group. I was probably an early single traveler to go there. And I met with the tour group, and Beijing, that's the only place we went. Beijing looked like, in 82, it looked like what you could imagine a U.S. city at the turn of the 20th century.
It was very sleepy at that time.
Gaslight streets, old equipment every year, very few cars, people on bicycles. It was just a whole different world. And then I went back in 94 with Lily Sue.
Is that when you start to do business kind of work as a lawyer with the mainland China in 1994?
Yes, it was. In 1994, it was very little bit of business then. A lot of my clients in Hong Kong had begun to do business in 86 when the Queen announced that she was going to give back Hong Kong at the end of the lease. And so I got a little bit involved with that, not too much, but then I went to China in 94, and I met a bunch of people through an economic conference. So we actually went there for the opening of this Taoist monastery, Longhushan Taoist Monastery.
Oh, that's how you got involved in business, through the Taoists. That's
not exactly, but that was my first introduction. So they had a Taoist monastery opening at night, and during the day they had economic conferences. And I got a number of requests when I got back for Chinese then looking for money from the United States to build things like power plants. And we went to talk to the Hawaiian Electric Company. And they actually ultimately invested some money in a power plant in China. And a number of other things. It was very backwards. They had what you might call a private placement memorandum for business investment, which, it was like a high school level kind of thing. It was so... It basically said, please invest some money, millions of dollars, in a power plant in China. We got a lot of people and they all need power.
Well, you think that they think that might be convincing enough.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Well, when you look,
if
if you're familiar with private placement offers in the United States that are 40 pages thick, and they tell you every issue, and they have projected financials and all kinds of things. So then I didn't do too much. I actually stopped going to Hong Kong unless I had to go for business. Instead of kind of having a regular 6 months, I'd be there and then just see what work was there. Around 1983, 84, I remarried and had children and decided I'm not going to travel unless I have to. But in, let's see, this is 2008, 2007, 2008, Mark Shklov, a local lawyer here, came to me. He was one of the co-founders of the Inter-Pacific Bar Association. And he said, Roger, I've just been speaking with a very senior lawyer in Shanghai, and he's been telling me that there are many lawyers in China now. So this is our 2007, 13 years after I thought things were just very immature, very unsophisticated. And so he said, look, we've got all this money coming in, all these investments. The lawyers here are really smart and they're very hardworking, but they're all 35 to 40 years old. And the reason is that anybody who would be practicing law between the ages of 40 and 60 have been what were either killed or not educated in the Cultural Revolution.
So we probably should give our audience just a little bit of the background. So China, Mao, communists took over China in 1949. Hong Kong was not part of China until I believe 1996. Yeah. When the British returned Hong Kong to China. Right now, there's still two systems.
Yes.
And so the Chinese legal system was really slow to build up. And even now, we can talk about some of these issues that with a one-party system, with a top-down control, the legal system is still not independent.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So you were dealing with this kind of lawyer in China. Were you? So since 2008, are you doing more in terms of helping Chinese to come to Hawaii? Because early on, your work is kind of going the other way.
Exactly. But now my work is going the Chinese coming to the United States, and we expect to see a lot more of that. And this is the opportunity for Hawaii. Chinese coming here, Chinese investment, Chinese individuals moving to the United States. And
tell us the kind of people you're helping, the kind of people who are moving here.
Yes.
And the kind of people you're helping.
Well, we're seeing an expansion. The first group that we started helping were people who were just buying houses here.
So you help them to deal with the tax implications, right?
The main thing for just a residence, so it's not a business, but the main tax problem are the U.S. estate and gift taxes. China has no estate and gift taxes, but the U.S. taxes are quite significant. And people who know the U.S. taxes know that for an American, you no longer have to pay estate taxes unless your estate is over $5 million. That's if you're an American. But if you're a non-resident, if you're a Chinese person who's just making investments in the United States, the threshold for tax instead of $5 million is $60,000 US. So if you bought a house, if you're a Chinese person, you bought a house on Wednesday for $1 million and you died on Friday, you would owe the US government $324,000 in estate taxes just for the privilege of having bought that house. So, but those taxes can be avoided if you plan your investment properly. And there's several ways to do that. Just to discuss it quickly, you could either set up a foreign corporation. So now you own let's say you own a Chinese corporation, and the Chinese corporation buys the house. Now, if you die, you don't own a U.S. property, you just own a Chinese corporation that owns a U.S. property, so there's no tax. Or you put your money into a trust and let the trust buy the property, and then when you die, it's not in your estate, it's still in the trust, and it just passes to your heirs without a tax.
What's interesting is all of these different tax codes and ways, even for Americans who lived here for a long time, it's still mind-boggling to deal with, and let alone Chinese who have a very different legal experience.
Oh yes, that's really true. And the U.S., the tax law is very international, and that's why I've been at the forefront of international work. Because if you're making a real estate investment from China, and you need to buy real estate in the United States, you need to know the laws of the United States, but you don't need to know anything about real estate law in China. But if you're coming to the United States from China to buy something that involves taxes, now you've got to know the taxes in China and the United States.
That's even more complicated.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And the Chinese, as you say, have a history of not being good about working with the law. You know, the government there is very strict, and if you get government approval, you're okay. But if you don't need to go to the government, you don't go. And people don't contact lawyers the way they do in the United States.
This is a very interesting additional challenge you're dealing with. So let's take a quick break, and after we come back, we'll explore this.
Okay.
And this is ThinkTech Asia. We've been discussing with Roger Epstein on China-Hawaii legal communities. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Seymour Kazimirski. Welcome to Seymour's World. We're here to open minds and facilitate conversations. Our topics range from human interest stories to political stories to around the world stories. I hope you enjoy our show. It's on ThinkTech Hawaii. Thank you.
Okay, I promise it's a short break, and that was short. And we're back. This is ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, Hong Jiang. And so right before the break, we'll talk about some of these interesting challenges. Not only you have Chinese coming here, not familiar with the country, with the laws, they also came with the experience and mindset of not dealing with the legal system.
Right.
So talk to us about some of the challenges you are dealing with working with the Chinese.
Well, a lot of the issues have to do with people who've already bought properties and didn't contact anyone.
Oh,
Can you help them?
I have money, I'll just buy something, right?
Yes, yes. And another problem with Chinese is they don't want to spend any money on lawyers. They're going to buy $1 million house, but they don't want to spend a few $1,000s to get their legal matters straightened out.
That's another interesting phenomenon, right?
Yes. And I've heard this from all kinds of service providers, real estate brokers. You know, they do a lot of work, which seems to be for free. If you're going to buy a house, you don't pay the real estate broker. They get paid out of the sales price.
That's right.
And they get paid from the seller. So they're used to that kind of free work too.
Oh.
So they don't really want to pay you for your services, which can be a problem.
So do you have to do some kind of education to let them know there are consequences, huge consequences?
You do. And I've been giving talks all over the state to real estate brokers, particularly for this aspect. Now, let me tell you another aspect. In addition to just buying real estate, there's a number of people in China who are moving here. I've been told that 60% of the wealthiest people in China would like to emigrate away from China. They're worried about the government. The air pollution in China, as you know, is just horrible.
That's right.
It's 10 times worse, at least 10 times worse than the worst day in Los Angeles.
That's right, yeah.
In Beijing and some other cities. Water pollution, and a lot of Chinese are concerned that the schools are not so good in China, and they want to take their children out and have them educated elsewhere, and the United States is one of the prime places, of course. So we're seeing a lot of people would like to get a green card to come over here, are actually changing their status, their residency, their immigration status to the United States. Well, again, they're not thinking, oh, I need to figure out what the laws are over in the United States. I mean, you're going to move to another country. Now remember, some of these people are extremely wealthy, billionaires, because they began to buy property in 1980 when the whole post-Mao period ended, and Deng Xiaoping began to kind of capitalize the entire country. And so people have been making fortunes. And so these people are looking to leave the country, and they're moving to another country, and they're worth $500 million. They don't take the time to investigate what are the legal issues, what are the tax consequences.
One thing I had to mention, having come from China,
yes,
is that in China, so much can be done without being done legally. Meaning, like if they have money, they'll hide it.
Right.
And nobody will find them. And even if it's found, of course, you can just bribe, and this person will let you go. So therefore, you don't pay tax.
Right.
So that's another
Right.
mindset that corruption is just daily life.
And I think of it as, you know, the Chinese, the mainland Chinese mindset is the law is something to avoid.
Exactly.
Something
That's
to work
exactly what I'm
around,
saying.
not something that we deal with in a way that one should.
That's right.
If they really believe that the laws were significant. and you couldn't just bribe somebody around it or get around it.
That's right.
So it's quite difficult. And we gave a talk. I've been going now to China every 6 months. In 2011, the Huangpu Judicial District in Shanghai, you know the Huangpu River in the center of Shanghai.
Yeah.
So on one side, the newest development in China was the Pudong International Trade Area, which is on the east side of central Shanghai. On the west side is the old Russian district, and a lot of businesses and a lot of lawyers are still located there. Well, we had been, this Richard Xu, who met Shklov, asked Shklov if we could begin to take some of these young lawyers to stay here, because they were young, hardworking, but they didn't have any mentors. And they didn't have any ethical knowledge about the practice of law. So we began taking lawyers for 3 months at a time, and then in 2000, and they would just come and stay at the Cades Schutte office for 3 months. And we would introduce them to U.S. law. We'd get them to write an article with another U.S. lawyer in my office between cross-border investments and how you do business. And then in 2011, the Huangpu Judicial District, so the government organization that you register with if you're a lawyer in this Huangpu area of Shanghai, they called us and asked us if we would take their lawyers. So now I have an agreement with the, Cades Schutte has an agreement with the Huangpu Judicial District government that we will take 2 lawyers a year and let them come stay with us as visiting lawyers. Every year we'll take 2 lawyers.
Well, that's a great exchange. You know, what's interesting is that we talk about how China, the legal system is not independent. A lot of it is underneath the party control.
Yes.
So these lawyers are probably learning the mindset of independent legal system that's setting the kind of foundation for a freer China in the future.
Sure,
perhaps.
absolutely. The thing that's so interesting to me about China and this relationship that we have with the Chinese government is so fascinating that the government wants these people to be educated. Because my experience with China, and you talked about the law, they didn't have any written laws in China till 1980. 30 years.
It was all under the party control.
It was all whatever the party said.
Yeah, that's
okay.
right. Yeah.
So now they're saying we want laws, we want to understand international practices, we want our lawyers to understand international practices. And I think that's pretty impressive that the government would make that effort. Now, they also, at that time, the Shanghai Bar Association made an agreement with the Hawaii State Bar Association. We have a signed cooperation agreement where we'll try to improve the quality of cross-border international legal practice for both countries.
So these kind of collaborations, are they mostly limited to cross-border issues, immigration issues, business cooperation kind of issues, but not dealing with any of the tricky kind of domestic issues, for example, human rights?
I don't think they want to discuss human rights, although some of the lawyers that come here are very interested in it. Interested in that. They're interested in spiritual things.
Oh, interesting.
Because they haven't had religion in China for over 50 years.
What are some of the comments from these lawyers who have been here? You know, what did they think they've learned?
Well, one of the comments I got that surprised me was this lawyer who was a very smart young man, he was almost 40. He said, I was really impressed with how serious lawyers take the law in the United States. Because, as you say, a lot of the work for Chinese lawyers is getting the government to go along with whatever you want. And it may not matter what the law is or what the technicalities are. It matters who you know and who you're dealing with. But I think many of them really felt that they'd learned a lot about the U.S. system and that would be helpful in their practice. And you know, Hawaii is a great place for this kind of experience because in downtown Honolulu, within 4 blocks of my office, which is right at Bishop and King Streets in the central downtown business area, are the courts, the governor, the mayor, the legislature. We bring all these lawyers, we bring them to all those different disciplines.
Oh.
They get to meet some of the presidents of the Bar Association are involved with our U.S.-China legal network. And it's very interesting for them to see. If they would go to New York, they might spend a year just working with a junior lawyer on one project.
That's right. And then Cades Schutte, it's not just any law firm, it's Cades Schutte.
Well, we're the largest law firm in the state,
Yeah.
and we're have a lot of experience in a lot of areas. And I've been doing international work, not just with China and Hong Kong, but Japan and Korea and Canada and Australia.
Wow.
For 42 years. So there's a lot of things that they can learn when they come here. I wanted to mention to you, when the government entered into this agreement with us, we decided, this is Mark Shklov and I, and I'm representing Cades Schutte. All my work is done for the law firm. Dean Larry Foster, he's the former dean of the UH Law School.
Yeah, that's right.
And his wife, Brenda Foster, was the CEO of the U.S. Shanghai Chamber of Commerce for 9 years.
That's right.
They just returned to Hawaii last summer. Larry was part of our group. And then we have an immigration lawyer who is now Philip Guo. And he's originally from Beijing. And he's been here in Hawaii for 8 years. And then Ben Lau is also an American-born Chinese who does a lot of financial work and investments, and was with law firms in New York and with Merrill Lynch. So we've got a broad group of people.
Great expertise there.
A lot
deal
of
with all aspects of immigration or taxes.
Yes.
Right?
And so we go to China twice a year, and we give talks to the Bar Association in Shanghai, these different judicial districts. We go to Beijing, and we have very good connections with lawyers there who are waiting for China to open up a little more with respect to their outbound investment. And most of their work has been inbound to date, but this is an area that's really going to be growing. We got involved with the city of Suzhou about 2 years ago with some of our alumni from the lawyers that came and stayed with us. One time we were there, they said, we have relations up in Suzhou, would you go to give a talk up there and meet the people that run the bar there? Well, Beijing is a city of 35 million people, and Shanghai has 25 million. Suzhou's just a little town of 13 million people.
Little town.
About an hour drive north and west, I think, of Shanghai. And so we gave a talk there last year, and then in April, Philip Guo and I were there, and we gave another talk, and we met with the head of the Suzhou Judicial District and the president of the Bar Association there. And they're very anxious to make relationships with Hawaii and have some of their lawyers either come as visiting lawyers, or we're having a conference call next week to talk to them about having some lawyers come and train in programs at the University of Hawaii Law School. And we're trying to find programs short. The University of Hawaii Law School has an excellent international LLM program. And they get lawyers from all over the world and all over Asia, Saudi Arabia, Korea, Vietnam, as well as China and Japan. And but that's a whole year commitment from your practice. And the people that are coming to visit us they're senior partners. Even if they're 40 years old, they're senior partners in their law firms. They don't want to take a whole year. So we're trying to find something that would make sense, whether it's a week, 3 weeks, a month, maybe combine it with other kinds of activities while you're here.
So these lawyers are coming here just to come to Cades Schutte and just to come to Hawaii. They're not going elsewhere.
At this point, the visiting lawyers have come and stayed at Cades Schutte, and then these other attorneys in town that I mentioned, and also the ThinkTech head honcho here, Jay Fidel, has been very active
I know
with the
he's
U.S.-China legal network.
Well,
and
he himself is a lawyer.
Oh yes, he's
That's
an
right.
excellent lawyer, and he's an old timer, and he takes these lawyers around to meet with various community groups. I think he's taken them to labor unions and other organizations that he has good relations with, so they can see how they operate and meet those people.
That's definitely, and it sounds like a great connection there and very, very beneficial. So we're going to have to take another short break. And after we come back, I want to come back to this whole question of Chinese coming here, what kind of tax
Okay.
or other kinds of services in law that they would need, and hear more stories from your
Okay.
experience
Okay.
there. So again, this is ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, and we've been talking about China-Hawaii legal communities, possibilities for mutual benefit. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard, and I host the show Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series right here every Wednesday from 2 to 3 Hawaii time. I would really love to have you watch the show and see what we do here. I talk with some of the most amazing people. Artists, most of them, all of them involved in some sort of artistic process. And our goal here on the show is to dig into that artistic process, and you would not believe what some people say, what some people do, what people go through to express. And these are people who have to express somehow, and I find that infinitely interesting. Not only that they have to express, but how they end up doing it. I really hope that you will watch the show and enjoy talking with some of these people the same way that I do. Thanks, and I hope to see you soon on Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series, Wednesdays from 2 to 3. See you soon.
Hi, we're back. We're live. This is ThinkTech Asia, and we've been speaking with Roger Epstein, a lawyer at Cades Schutte, about tax law and its implications for Chinese moving out here or doing business here. So let's hear more about those particular implications, because there'll be Chinese out there watching this, and they said, well, how can I get services, and what does it mean for me to get the services, and what do I need? So tell us some of the
Well, that's
stories.
the estate and gift tax I talked to you about. Just if you're just buying property here, you need to be concerned about that. If you're immigrating here, you need to be even more concerned. So if you're going to be moving here, well, the estate and gift taxes are huge. I mean, some of these people they have assets of hundreds of millions of dollars. Once you become a U.S. resident, any gift you make from anywhere in the world becomes subject to U.S. tax. So the estate and gift tax for Americans is you don't pay any till you give away or you die with $5 million of assets. For foreigners, it's $60,000, but that's only with respect to their U.S. assets. But once you get a green card and you come here, you get the benefit of the $5 million, but now the U.S. tax is on all your worldwide assets. So if you're in China with $500 million worth of factories and you move to the United States without doing any planning, if you were to die or you want to gift some stock in your company to your children, you've got to pay U.S. estate and gift tax on all that. So you can do all kinds of initial planning for that. So we're working with immigration lawyers and saying, well, if you're going to immigrate over here, you need to think about your tax planning before you get here. So that's another avenue. A third avenue is going to be more people buying U.S. companies here and expanding their Chinese companies to come here. Now, one of the big issues for China about investment outside the country are the currency restrictions. So now an individual is limited to $50,000 U.S. You can only exchange your renminbi, your Chinese currency, into $50,000 of U.S. currency every year.
Oh, okay. That's
so
for anybody.
For
everybody?
any Chinese
Okay.
person. And so if you want to do that, how do you buy $1 million house? So you either have to get the money out illegally, or you get 20 relatives to say, I'm taking out $50,000, and you give them all the $50,000, and then you buy the $1 million house. So it's not open. The other thing is businesses, when they want to invest here, they have to get approval for the investment from the MOFCOM, the Ministry of Commerce. And so the investments, many of the investments we hear about now in Africa for hundreds of $millions, these are state-owned enterprises that are making investments, not just the general public, the wealthy general public. So we're not seeing as much of the wealthy general public actually buying things. It's limited to the government organizations. So they're owned by the government. They appear to be public companies, but they're mostly owned by the government. What I'm seeing coming, the intention is that more individuals be able to bring their money out. So if in Orange County, California, over 50% of the home sales were to Chinese.
Oh, wow.
Now think about that when it's
they're
illegal to get the
coming.
money out. When the floodgates open, it's going to be quite a different situation, I think. Much, much more expansive, like the Japanese investments in the 80s that we saw. And so two things are going on. 2 years ago in the 5-year plan in China, the premier said, we want people to start investing money outside the country.
Okay.
And they opened up something, they had a plan to expand in one city, Wenzhou, a southeastern coastal city, very wealthy, to let people take out $3 million instead of $50,000. But they never implemented the plan. They announced it and they never put out regulations to implement it. They have a big worry that if the currency gets more freely out in the world, that the value will go way up, and that will hurt their manufacturing. So
Because the Chinese government is known to really want to control
they want to control.
the currency.
So they get worried about the control.
Yeah.
But that was their first discussion about it. That didn't work out. Now there's something called the Shanghai Free Trade Pilot Zone. Now this is a law that went on the books a year ago, but nobody acts on laws until the regulations come out, so you'll know what's going on. So people have been signing up, creating shell companies in China, in Shanghai, in this Shanghai Free Trade Zone, in anticipation of the regulations coming out, that they'll be able to more freely exchange funds and make investments outside the country. And so the two things from a lot of the Shanghai Free Trade Pilot Zone has to do with money coming in, but for outbound from China to Hawaii or any place in the United States, what we're seeing, what we're hoping for is that number one, if you make an outbound investment, you only have to notify the government. You don't have to get their approval to buy a business.
Okay.
And secondly, you can freely trade your renminbi into any currency in the world without limitation.
So your guess is that this is going to come, and when it does, then that's basically opening the floodgate.
Opening the floodgates, that's what we see.
Some of them are going to fly to China.
And we're already seeing a huge amount of investment from China while it's still under wraps. So when
what's really interesting, you talk about this law there's a limit in terms of how much people can get the hard currency. But from what I read, I'm sure you know better than me, that there's so many Chinese officials have this huge asset outside China.
Right.
Yeah, billions and billions of dollars. How do they move those?
Well, that is done, through Chinese means that I haven't been involved with. But if you can get your money to Hong Kong, then you can get it out.
Okay, so there are various other.
And if you're able to set up a business in the United States, then you can invest money in that business. So that's another way to get it out. So Chinese government officials, they can get approval for their investments outside the country. And
That's
then
right.
they can move
They
as
will
much
be able
currency
to.
as they want to.
That's right, yeah.
But for many others, it's been quite difficult.
Yeah.
So these regulations for the Shanghai Free Trade Pilot Zone are supposed to come out in September.
Wow. Well, we wait and see, and that means a lot of people hopefully would come and seek your service.
Well, not only my service, I think there's going to be tremendous potential for many attorneys as well as accountants and other professionals in Hawaii, architects. I've seen a lot of Chinese coming and say, I'd like to buy some acreage and build 10 houses on it, this kind of thing. And so if people will remember when the Chinese came here, after a while, now they're part of the community. now they have other needs to, I mean, they've already opened bank accounts, but they may have need for wills and trusts. They may have need for zoning issues with real estate lawyers. They may have need for litigation. Somebody might sue them. They might be in traffic accidents. They're buying businesses and setting up companies. So, and they're amongst our wealthiest citizens. They will be. So these are issues that I think it's a tremendous opportunity for many lawyers in Hawaii. We happen to be in the forefront. And as I said before, tax law is something that becomes international because you got to know the law in each country. It doesn't make sense to save money in the United States if you're going to pay more in China. Or structure it so that if the United States taxes are higher, how do we move the income to China so it's taxed at the lower rates over there?
So for you to help people, you basically have to be familiar with both laws in the US and laws in China so that you can advise them about where to place their assets.
Yes, a little bit, but we also have contacts. We have lawyers in China who can give them advice on Chinese law. So I never, if I can help it, and you know the Chinese are pretty secretive and they don't want to spend a lot of money, but I tell them, you got to have lawyers in China so we do this thing right. And more they're listening to me.
Well, that's good. So we have just 3-4 minutes left. A quick advice you have for people who are thinking of moving out of China, coming to Hawaii, or invest in Hawaii, and all these mind-boggling aspects of things they need to deal with.
Yes.
What is your advice in terms of how they proceed?
Well, the first thing is don't be penny wise and pound foolish. You've got huge assets to protect from estate and gift taxation. You're going to be making money in the United States if you're making business investments. Do the planning up front. Don't get caught trying to catch up. You made mistakes. We see this all the time. We saw it a lot with the Japanese. I had a lot of business with the Bank of Hawaii's international branch with the Chinese because they didn't think about it before they made investments, and then they had to try to figure out other ways to fix it up. And I'm worried about the Chinese because of that. And I've been talking with these bar associations now in Suzhou and Shanghai and other lawyers about let's give some talks to the community and tell them you got to get legal advice. Yeah. You're in a foreign country. There's a lot of money involved. So that's the first thing. Do your homework up front. Spend a little time. We gave a talk in Beijing to 40 people who already had their green cards. Oh. And we told them the U.S. tax consequences of being being resident alien in the United States. They were shocked. They had no idea.
Maybe they thought, well, they can just evade them left and right.
I think they do. And they have this same mentality. We're not gonna worry about the law. We'll worry about it when the time comes. And they said, how are they going to catch me?
Well, that's a very common mindset. How can they catch
me?
Yeah.
I said, well, you've got assets in the United States. You've got a house you bought here. You've got a business. If you die, your wife has to fill out an estate tax for you under penalties of perjury, listing all your assets. If she doesn't list $200 million worth of assets you have in China, and she gets caught, she's gone to jail. You want to put that risk on your wife?
Serious business.
I'm serious. She's got to file these returns under penalties of perjury.
Yeah.
And so if you just planned in advance, you avoid all this problem.
What very interesting point you make here is that not only do they need to understand the consequences in terms of taxes, they, I think, first need to know the seriousness of the law here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And so we're helping educate the lawyers over there to help educate their clients. And that's a discussion I've been having for the last year or so. I was in China in April, and I met very at length with the Suzhou Bar Association, which would like to create a relationship here in Hawaii, and members of the Huangpu Judicial District. And I just said, you know, you need to educate these people, and all the talks I've been giving.
That's definitely important work. And very last information I want you to tell people, if people are interested in finding you or Cades Schutte, how can they find you?
Oh, thank you. Well, yes, go to the Cades Schutte website, and I'm there. We have a group of lawyers that do international business work, international tax work, international estate planning. We'd be very happy to help you. I'm interested in this, and I think it's good for relations between China and Hawaii. And so anything we can do to help educate you as a broker or help educate the Chinese clients when they come over here as to what they need, we're really happy to be of service and hope we develop a long-term relationship that's mutually beneficial for everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Roger, for being here. And that is Roger Epstein, lawyer at Cades Schutte, and you know how to find him and get help if you think you are in that category of people moving from China to here. And I'm your host, Hong Jiang. This is ThinkTech Asia. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.